Last time we began looking at the story of a man named Benaiah who killed a lion in a pit on a snowy day. And you might not think it would take too long to look at a 15-word story, but there's a lot there. And we asked the question last time, why? Was it just an adventure? And I don't think so. How about an act of faith? Yes, but to be faith, God has to lead it. There has to be a good reason for it. Well, what's the good reason? And we saw from the context that Benaiah has had a character of protecting people. And so that shows us then that that's what he was doing when he went down into this pit. And you can see how that'd be true, that the lion fell into the pit on a snowy day and couldn't get out. Well, anyone else might fall into that pit, not be able to get out, and it'd be pretty clear what would happen to them. And so Benaiah went down in there to protect people. And as we seek the lesson and to apply that to us, well, I need to be aware of the lion that we face. The Bible tells us that's Satan. He prowls around like a roaring lion looking for someone to devour. And not only am I in danger, well, other people are. And part of my life as a believer is I need to be willing to go down into the pit and protect people when they're in spiritual danger from Satan. Well, to know how to do that, I need to know what the specific danger is. If someone was in danger from frostbite, well, then the how I would protect them would be some extra clothes or get them in even better, out of the cold. So I need to know what are the dangers that people face spiritually. And a couple of them might even be hinted at here in the text. I read someone's take on this passage, and he talked about the fact that sometimes in the Old Testament, Moab and Egypt have spiritual applications. And you remember, Benaiah killed two of Moab's greatest warriors. Well, Moab can represent our sinful nature or our flesh, that part of us that still is tempted by sin. And the reason for that is that Moab was sort of related to the godly line. Abraham, Isaac, Jacob, and his sons, the line that led to Israel. Moab came from Abraham, his nephew Lot. Moab was one of the sons of Lot. And so maybe that's true. I tell you, for one thing, though, the danger definitely is true. The Bible talks about our sinful nature. It says in Galatians 5:19, when you follow the desires of your sinful nature, the results are very clear. Sexual immorality, impurity, lustful pleasures, idolatry, sorcery. We always like to hear those because I'm pretty good there, right? But hostility, quarreling, jealousy, outburst of anger, selfish ambition, dissension, division, envy, drunkenness, wild parties, and other sins like these. There's that part of us that's still drawn to these things, and there's that part of everyone. And so when I see Satan, creeping up on someone using, their sinful nature, that danger, I need to be aware. I need to go down into the pit to help them. And then Egypt in the Old Testament can represent the world. And Benaiah killed a giant, a 7.5-foot tall soldier from Egypt. Well, it represents the world. You think about times, when Abram came to the promised land initially and there was a famine. What did he do? Well, without asking God, he went down to Egypt. Why? Because he knew that there would be water there because of the Nile, and so there'd be food there. And so it has this idea of walking by sight versus faith. Trusting what I can see versus trusting in God. And that's definitely a danger for us as well. And that's why 1 John 2 says, do not love the world or the things of this world. And so that can be the things we might think of, the pleasures, but even then there's that faith side element. I see that these things bring pleasure. I don't see how it's going to be best not to do them. I don't trust God that it's best. I see how I can rely on, money or power or position, either mine or someone else's, to get through a situation. I don't see how God's going to do it. I need to have faith in Him. That's that choice, that draw. But we have to, because 1 Peter 2 says, dear friends, I warn you as temporary residents and foreigners to keep away from worldly desires that wage war against your very souls. Against your very souls. Why? Well, because this relationship with God, again, we're to walk by faith, not by sight. That's just inherent in what it's to be. So when we do the opposite, it's endangering our very souls. Satan is trying to use that to devour people. Well, I want to think of other things, other dangers, and especially the foundational ones, not just specifics, what, underlying things. And the biggest underlying anything is our worldview, how we view the world. And not talking physically, I'm a little colorblind, so I view it different than other people in that way. But just my basic outlook, and the most basic distinction there is do I believe there's a God or do I not believe it? That's just going to cause a radically different way of viewing the world and then acting, or at least it should, especially for those of us who believe there is a God. If you don't believe in God, one of the key implications is you won't believe in moral absolutes, things that are absolutely right or wrong. Whereas if you believe in God, you certainly should, but even then, there's a danger that Satan is using today. A lot of people who believe in God have bought into what the world around us talks about and says, and just is totally characterized by this lack of absolutes, what we call relativism. And so there's a lot of Christians that don't believe in absolutes, certainly not clearly. They might not even know what they're saying denies it, but it does, and it's a danger. And then a similar danger is what I'd call a false word view. The word, the truth about God, about who He is and what His relationship with us is like. There's a basic distinction there through all of man's interaction with whatever God they had in mind. It talks about this in Colossians. It says, "See to it that no one takes you captive through hollow and deceptive philosophy." Paul's talking to these Christians, and some false teaching was coming in, and he characterizes it. He says it depends on human tradition and the elementary principles of this world rather than on Christ. Well, human tradition, when it comes to relating to God, the elementary principles he talks about, the ABCs of human religion, it is totally based on works. You look at any other religion, and it's all about, I relate to God based on my works. Paul says no, and that's opposed to Christ. And Christ is being used there to characterize God and the way He does it, which is grace. By grace through faith. But this one has been a danger since Paul was writing the New Testament, and it continues today that people don't understand this grace basis of our relationship with God, and it just totally corrupts. Paul talks about in Galatians how serious it is, corrupts the nature of our relationship. We either think, I relate to God based on how good I am, and I'm pretty good, and so I have pride, or I'm not good at all, so I have shame and hopelessness. Both of those are dangers. And then one other one came to mind. I was thinking some more, and at first I thought, well, this one doesn't really rank up there, but I think it does. I'm talking about discouragement. Psalm 22, verses 1 and 2, David writes in the first phrase we're probably familiar with, my God, why have you forsaken me?" Jesus quoted that on the cross about Himself, but David wrote these words about something he was going through. He goes on to say to God, "Why are you so far from saving me? So far from my cries of anguish. My God, I cry out by day, but you do not answer, by night, but I find no rest." That's not David saying, hey, I had a bad day. Like, I am totally discouraged by what's going on and what it seems like, how God is responding or not. We can all get that way, and it's serious. Every one of these is serious. Satan is prowling around seeking someone to devour spiritually, to draw us away from God, ultimately to the point of totally away from God. That's true for you and I personally, but again, the point of this passage is it's true for others too, and I need to be looking. Are they in danger of falling into a pit in any one of these ways? I need to be looking out and then do what I need to do. And that's what we're going to look at next time. How then do I protect people from these specific dangers? How do I go down in the pit with them? So that'll be next time. Until then, check out the action steps. Thanks.